Hello and welcome. My name is Heath Einstein. I am Dean of Admission at Texas Christian University, and you have joined a Facebook Live session that the Office of Admission has been doing now for several months. And we are just ecstatic that you are with us this evening, or this afternoon, or this morning, depending on where in the world you are joining us from. And I just have to say, it's so awesome to scroll through the comments and see where everybody is coming from. So hello to Simran from Georgetown, Texas, which is just outside Austin, for those of you who are not familiar with Texas geography. Hello to Tony, who's coming to us from Michigan and wants to attend TCU. Love seeing that. Hello to Katya, who has a student named Talia, and y'all are from Cyprus, which is outside of Houston. And we've got tons of folks from outside of Texas as well. I see Diane from Southern California. That's where I am from, Southern California. So shout out to the Golden State. Ginger from Atlanta. It is so awesome to have all of you with us. So we're here this evening to talk about the college essay. And the timing couldn't be better, because in just about 3.5 weeks, the application for admission to TCU will open for those who are interested in joining us in the fall 2022 semester. I can't believe that we have to think that far ahead. That is crazy. But before we do that, like we do at all of our Office of Admission functions, whether they are virtual or in person, we start with a land acknowledgement. We think that is incredibly important to honor the space where we are located. And so we respectfully acknowledge all Native peoples who have lived here since time immemorial. And we are particularly grateful to the Wichita and affiliated tribes upon whose ancient ancestral homeland TCU resides. So much appreciation. And with that, I want to allow my guests to introduce themselves this evening. We are so fortunate to have with us Dalton Goodier and Dr. Wendi Sierra joining us. So Dalton, why don't you start with a brief introduction?
Great. Thanks so much, Heath. Appreciate that. Like Heath said, my name is Dalton Goodier, and I am part of the team here at TCU's Office of Admission. So I'm a senior admission counselor, and it was really awesome reading through a lot of those comments and seeing students from a lot of the areas where I specifically work with those students and those high schools. So I have been here at TCU for about 6 years now, and I'm just really excited to spend this time answering your questions and hopefully taking a little bit of the stress off of this wild application process.
Thanks. And Wendi, good to have you with us.
Hi, Sigulus everyone. Hello, I'm Dr. Wendi Sierra. This is my first year at TCU this past academic year, and I'm an assistant professor of game studies in the Honors College. So I study narrative in games, storytelling in games. I've made my own Oneida language game, and I also do reading on honors admissions essays. So yeah, excited to chat with everyone.
Thank you. And Dr. Sierra, your expertise will come in so handy this evening. So as I mentioned, this is one of a series of programs we've had over the last several months. In fact, this is the 5th. We started back in March talking about the campus visit and standardized tests. In April, we talked about scholarship and financial aid. 2 months ago in May, we talked about course selection, which is important in thinking about how to put together your curriculum in preparing for college or in preparing to transfer from another institution to TCU. And last month, we talked about building your resume and the importance of that, both in preparation for college as well as during the college journey itself and preparing for life after college. This month, we're talking about the college essay. And we'll do that over the course of the next 55 minutes or so. Each of us will have some advice that we'll provide for you, and then we'll open it up to questions. And while the focus of this evening's remarks will be on the college essay, if we have time to touch on other aspects of the college search and the college admission process, and you've got questions, we might be able to get to that as well. we have done this in this sort of unscripted way now for the last few months, and it's been wildly successful. I think even more successful than we anticipated. I kind of thought we'd have like a handful of students and maybe some people on our staff and my mom and dad. But actually, we get a lot of interaction from those who seem interested in college admissions, and the feedback's been great. In fact, I remember after the second one, I had a father in my office. He and his daughter were visiting TCU, and he says to me, can I give you some feedback on the Facebook Live sessions you're doing? And that's sort of like I didn't really have a chance to say no to that, right? If someone says, can I give you feedback? They really want to give you feedback. So I said, sure. And he said, this is great. Please keep doing this, because this is engagement that we don't get with other colleges. And so that's wonderful to hear. And we will continue to do that as long as we continue to have an audience who seems to be interested in that. So like the other programs that we've done, this is unscripted and it's scheduled for an hour. If we have content for an hour, we'll go that long. If we don't, then we'll stop and say it was a great evening. And then before I begin, I just want to extend my gratitude to Rob Berline from Alumni Relations, Amy Peterson in Marketing and Communication, and Liz Rainwater in the Office of Admission, all of whom are helping behind the scenes. You can't see them or hear them, but they're helping us stay on track this evening. So, okay, the college essay. It is perhaps the most dreaded part of the application process because it is so time consuming. And I think a lot of students feel like the decision of whether a student is going to be to the university or not, or whether they're admitted to a special program like the Honors College or not, rests solely on that 300 to 500 word document that you submit. And the reality is that we have a host of factors that we consider. The essay is important, but it is not the only factor. So I say that only to try to bring the anxiety down a little bit, that not everything rests on the words that you put on that page. It probably would help for you to know that TCU accepts 4 different application types, or applications from 4 different platforms. So as a student is applying, a student would choose the one that works for them. They are the common application. You might have heard of that. It's a generic document that's accepted by about 950 different colleges, primarily found in the United States. And you just have to fill out one application, and you designate which colleges among the partner institutions that you would like that application to be sent. And it's a lot easier than doing like 8 different applications. If you were applying to 8 different colleges, you might be able to get away with just doing one application. So it can save a little bit of time. There is something called the Coalition for College. It is another consortium of schools that have gathered together with a similar set of values and common information that we're interested in knowing. And so you can use that application. We also are part of something called Apply Texas, which is common to colleges within the state of Texas. Every public institution and almost every private institution uses Apply Texas. So if you're only applying to Texas colleges, that's something you can choose. And then we also have developed our own application. And so you can just go on our website and find the application there. It doesn't matter which one of these 4 applications you choose. I'm going to repeat that so that you believe me. It doesn't matter which one of these 4 applications you choose. In fact, when TCU or any other college agrees to partner with these organizations like the Common App or Coalition, we actually sign a document that says we will show no favoritism towards students who use our application instead of that application. So some students will choose the application that they use based on the group of schools they're applying to. As I said before, if you're applying to 8 schools and they're all on the Common App, it could make some sense to do that. Another approach might be to choose based on the essay prompts, because each application will ask a different set of essays, and you're going to have to choose one of the essays to respond to. Okay, so for example, at TCU, we have 4 different application essays that students can choose from. It doesn't matter which of the 4 you choose. So when we say more than 4 essay prompts, we mean the 4 on our application plus the others that are part of those other application types. Some of the questions will ask you about, your thoughts as a leader. Others might ask you to talk about an individual who's had an impact on you, might ask you to talk about what matters in your life. we specifically designed these questions to provide a range of opportunity to elicit responses that reflect your personality. Some people want to talk about big ideas in the world. Others want to share, again, like sort of their life philosophy. Some students prefer to discuss someone who's inspired them, and all of that works because there really aren't any right or wrong answers to this. It's just, can you effectively communicate your ideas? Because at the end of the day, what we're trying to understand from you when we're reading these essays is, number one, can you write effectively? Because no matter what you choose to major in college, whether it's creative writing or physics, you're going to have to write. You're going to have to write as part of our core curriculum and many other classes that you're going to take at TCU. The other important reason why we ask students to respond to an essay is because it sheds some light into who you are. It gives us a window into your personality. So that's really important for us as we're trying to bring together a class of students. And speaking of no right or wrong answers, there always is the question about whether there are right or wrong topics. And I would say for the most part, there are no right or wrong topics. I say for the most part because I think there probably are some things you might want to steer clear of. Believe it or not, on occasion we get students who talk about drug use or sexual activity or things that just are not appropriate for people you don't know and not appropriate to be talking about in a college essay. Aside from that, though, you really can go in any direction you'd like. Some students will choose topics that might seem a little bit controversial, maybe a political opinion that they have. And again, we're not judging you on those opinions. We're assessing your ability to effectively communicate on those topics. So really write on something that you know about and you think that you're going to care a lot about. The other comment I'll make before I toss it over to Dalton is that very often colleges, especially selective colleges, will also ask you some short answer questions or what we call custom questions. So while you are filling out that sort of main essay that will go to every college, if you use the Common Application, for example, we're going to have some TCU specific questions that we ask. And I'll share right now exactly what they are. The first, and we've asked this for many years, is what makes TCU a great fit for you? We want to understand the relationship that you have with the university and why you think we might be a good fit for you and you might be a good fit for TCU, what that relationship looks like. And a demonstration that you've done some research into the university. The other question that we ask is, and this is new this year, we're really excited about it in our office, is inclusive excellence views diversity, equity, and inclusion as a responsibility from all members of the TCU community. An inclusive campus leads to innovation while broadening perspective and understanding, values that are foundational to higher education. Describe how you have or plan to contribute to an inclusive college environment. And we've worded that with intention to recognize that not everybody is on the same journey at the same exact time. Some people have some experiences that they can draw upon. Other students have a vision for what their experience in college might look like, all for the greater good. And we're really curious to learn about you and how you plan to be part of our inclusive community. So I will leave it at that. I'm going to hand the torch over to Dalton, and then and away we go.
Great. Well, thanks so much for that, Heath. Yeah, so I am one of the people who will actively be reading through all of your different application essays and using those kind of as part of that decision-making process that we're doing in our office. So there are a few different things that we are really going to be looking for. And so for you students, as you kind of finish up your essay and you're getting ready to submit that and everything, there are kind of three big questions that I want you to ask yourself. And I think that if you are able to answer those in the right way, then you can tell that you've got a good essay on your hands that's really going to show off who you are as a person and why you're such a great option for TCU. So that first question that you ought to be asking once you finish that up is this essay about me? This is really your opportunity to show your personality and who you are as a person. And sometimes we will read through essays that will talk about like a really important person in the applicant's life. You know, maybe it is a family member or someone that is at their school that's been a huge leader and mentor in their life. And that's great. So that is not a topic that's going to be out of bounds at all. We want to know about those people who are important to you. But again, this essay is still going to be about who you are as a person. So you can use that essay where you're talking about the relationship that you have with your grandmother or with your soccer coach or something like that. And that's great. We want to know about those people who are important in your life, but we want to use that as a lens through which we can learn more about you. So what is your connection to this person? How does that really affect the high school career that you've had and who you want to be going into college and even beyond that? The second question that you ought to be asking is, does my essay show growth or change for me as a person? So in this example, there are a lot of times where I will read an essay about a big challenge that a student has encountered in their life. Maybe they had a big injury in the state championship game. That was a really disappointing experience. Or they tried out for something and didn't get to make that team. And they really had to kind of deal with what that meant for them. Again, that is fine. That's a great essay topic, but we want to see how you changed because of that experience. How did you grow through that, and how did you really respond to that sort of adversity? So again, we want this essay to be about you and your growth and development, and not just about this difficult situation that you found yourself in or something that happened to you. So again, just using that as that sort of lens through which we get to see how you're changing as a person and what that's going to mean for you once you actually jump into your college career. And then the last question that you should be asking yourself is, does this essay share anything new about me? Or is this something that they're already going to see in the rest of my application? So we are going to get a lot of information about you once you apply to TCU. We're going to be seeing your resume and all the leadership positions that you've held. We're going to take a look at your transcripts so we can see all those rigorous courses that you've taken. We're reading those recommendations, so we get to learn a little bit more about your personality. So use this essay to talk about something that's not going to show up in every other part of that application. So an example here is, let's say that you are super dedicated to like one specific organization or club at your school. And we see this everywhere else in your application. It is all over your resume. Your letters of recommendation talk about how engaged and involved you are in this specific thing. If we're going to be seeing so much of that part of your personality already, then consider using your essay to tell us something else about you. Maybe it's something else that you are really engaged in. Maybe it's a different story that's not necessarily going to pop up on your activities list, but still shows that insight into your personality. So using that as something that can supplement everything else that you're doing on your application is a way that you can really strengthen it and show us another side to who you are. So those are just some quick things to be thinking about as you are finishing up your essay. Again, we want to see that this is something that is about you. We want to see the change and growth that you have had through those experiences that you are writing about, and use that as a space and a time to show off something new and unique about yourself instead of just going back over, kind of something that we're going to be seeing through the rest of the application. All right. So thanks, and back to you, Heath.
Thanks, Dalton. And now we're going to turn it over to Dr. Sierra to provide her perspective.
Yeah, and I hear you guys talking about show who you are, show your personality. And I recall when I was a high school student thinking about that was just a sort of a weird thing for me. And I didn't really understand, well, why does the college want to see my personality? You've got my transcripts, you've got my letters of recommendation. Like, why isn't that enough? And what I didn't realize then is that not every student is a fit for every college. And that doesn't necessarily mean that your grades are bad or that anything else is wrong, but every college has a slightly different agenda. Every college has a slightly different set of values, a slightly different student body. And so one of the reasons the college wants to see your personality is because it fills in that little bit that goes beyond what's your GPA, what did you make on the SATs, right? And starts to get into that idea of how are you going to fit into our community. And that's one of the things I think. So my training, in my undergrad and in my master's and PhD was in rhetoric. And so I approach everything as a rhetorical situation and think about audience, right? And what is that audience value? And I think that that's a good perspective to go with for an admissions essay. I have read some essays for the Honors College that I really just wish I could sit down next to that student before they wrote that essay and say, like, look, I get that you read this prompt and you went in this direction with it. But what you're not paying attention to is what the Honors College values and what we want to see in our community. So, for example, the Honors College at TCU serves every single major, right? We have students from across the campus that are in the Honors College. And so we have a really interdisciplinary focus. If you take an honors class, you're in there with students from all sorts of different majors. And that class that you take may have nothing to do with your major, right? So we like to see students that are going to appreciate that interdisciplinary focus, that are going to enjoy that. We also want to see creative thinkers. We don't think of ourselves as the place where you take the hardest classes. We hope that we are the place where you get to do the most creative exploration in what you're learning. And so when I read an admissions essay, I am more likely to give a high score to a student that shows me that they're going to embody those values, that they're going to bring that to my classroom than I am to the most grammatically correct essay, right? I would take an essay with a few spelling errors that embodied those values over an essay with perfect spelling that didn't embody those values. Which is not to say that spelling doesn't matter, but like, and so one quick example, one of the questions that you have the option to pick for honors colleges, if you could invite a guest speaker to come talk to all of the honors students, who would you invite and why? And I've read essays where a business student says they'll invite a business person to learn about business topics, right? And that just doesn't speak to the rest of the college. Now, you could be a business major inviting a business person if you can explain to me how this business person is going to have something that students of all backgrounds can learn, right? So you're going to bring that interdisciplinary bit in, and you're going to bring that creative thinking in. So yeah, I think about who you're writing this admissions essay to and what they're going to value in you, and what their values as an institution are. That's my number one suggestion.
That is great advice. And I think there's going to be an opportunity for all of us to offer even more advice because the questions have started to roll in. This is exciting. Please don't hesitate to use the comment section to continue to ask questions. We will get to as many as we can over the course of the next 37 minutes. So the first one, and I'm going to throw this one to you, Dalton. Taylor Baker asks, should I make sure to put my pronouns in my essay? And I think this is just sort of a general question about stylistic choices in responding to essay prompts on the college essay and how it might differ from, an essay that you're writing for an English class, like a term paper or something like that. So how would you respond to Taylor's question?
Sure. Yeah. And that actually does kind of remind me of another question that's up here about just kind of style in general. And are we looking to be a little more formal or informal? And the answer to both of those is that that's totally up to you. So if that's something that you want to share with us, then you are more than welcome to, especially if that is going to be a big part of your essay and what you want to share with us on that. But again, I mean, this is your essay, and this is your opportunity to show us, what's important to you and who you are as a person. One of my favorite essays that I have ever read was something that was extremely informal. It was a very silly essay. The whole thing was about how she had grown up and she always brought her own silverware to the school cafeteria. And she did this whole thing about it that was really funny. And she kind of turned it on herself at the very end and said, as I have grown through all these different things, and she used that to talk about her different high school experiences. She said, I'm really excited to go to college. And I think I'm even going to give their silverware a try. So it's something that is, maybe not like this huge, worldwide issue that she wants to tackle. Maybe it's not the most compelling, most important individual moment that happened in her life. But I laughed out loud multiple times reading that. And I finished it being so excited to hopefully have that person come here to TCU. So long story short, if it's something that is important to you and that you want us to know about you as we are reading through your application, then that's great. Use whatever style is important to you, but at the same time, don't feel pressured into adding anything else there just because you think it's what we want to hear. So be as true to yourself and as authentic as possible, and that's going to shine through when you're actually submitting that essay for us.
Yeah, I think that's such good advice, Dalton. Playing to your strengths, right? The example that you cited is of a student who was able to illustrate their sense of humor, which is great if you have a great sense of humor and can use that effectively in your writing. Not everyone has that skill. And sometimes if you try to be funny and you're not, it falls a little flat. So again, don't try to think about what we want to see. Just what we want to see is you. And if you means writing a hilarious essay, great. And if it's not, that's okay too. The other thing that you mentioned, which is a perfect segue to the next question, is sort of this idea that we want to finish reading and think to ourselves, is this somebody we'd love to have on our campus? Is this somebody we'd want to get to know better? And the question that Namrata Tawari asks is, how do you know your essay is complete without falling into the cycle of endless editing? And it's such a great question. So Dr. Sierra, if you wouldn't mind responding to that, because I know you have a lot of experience writing as well as reading essays. And how do you know when you're done?
Yeah, that's so rough. I just recently finished a book, and by the time we got to the copy editing phase, which you can't make any more changes at that point. Like, you can change a comma, but you can't change anything else. It was painful for me to read because I kept seeing things that I was like, oh, I wish I phrased it this way. I wish I had changed this. If I had just a little more time, I could tweak that, right? And like, at the end of the day, like, that sucker's got to go to press. You've got to stop making changes and put it out the door. And there's a deadline on when you have to apply for a college. So you've got to stop at some point, right? I would say if you have people in your social circle that you feel comfortable letting them read it, that would be my best tip, is get other people to read it. Because once you've read your work, whether it's a book or an essay for school or a blog post or whatever, right? Once you've read it a million times, you can't see it anymore. So get some fresh eyes when you feel like you're getting too close to a good point. And if someone else says, like, this is it, you're done, that's a good sense of when you should stop. I think fresh eyes is always, and I send stuff to my mommy, right? Like, it can be a teacher or a counselor, but I'm a college professor and I still send stuff to my mom to read, to tell me, like, is this good or is it done? Right.
I think that's outstanding. Dalton, in your experience, to follow up on that, are there people in the sphere of a school setting, let's say, who are of particular value, who can provide some insights?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say that it's going to look different depending on like what your school is like. Try to get one mentor and one peer. So one friend or someone that's your age to kind of go over it, and then one adult. Maybe this is the college counselor at your school. Maybe it's a favorite English teacher. Or maybe it's a teacher in another subject, but it's someone that you really trust, and that they will read it and give you the best feedback possible. So just like with editing over and over and over, you can fall into this trap of showing it to everyone. But as you're writing your essay, just know that your acceptance to TCU does not hinge on one perfect phrase. We're not going to say, wow, like, this student is so close to being admissible, but the third paragraph on their essay was, not quite there. So once you are happy with knowing that it really shows who you are as a person and you are getting your personality across, I think that's a great time to be ready to do those final tiny little edits, check your spelling one more time, and then send that in to us.
Yeah, and one of the best pieces of advice that I've received or I've heard over the years that I've now gotten into the habit of imparting to prospective students, and perhaps you two have heard this before, is the essay is done when, if it's left in the hallway of your school and it didn't have your name on it, but somebody picked it up and read it and they knew it was you. If they knew that the essay was about you, or you were the one who wrote it, even if your name wasn't on it, then you've gotten somewhere that helps the reader understand exactly who you are. So think about it perhaps in those terms.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned getting a peer to read your essay. And I think like trade that service, right? I'll read yours and you read mine. I always have students do peer reviewing in classes where I assign papers. And it's not actually because I think necessarily that the feedback that they get on their own paper is always the best, but it's because it can really open your eyes to read someone else's essay. You might say, oh, I didn't think of phrasing things that way, or I didn't think of adding that angle. I didn't think of putting that in. The college admissions essay is not a genre that you're probably super familiar with because you don't do them very often, right? So if you can get your eyes on what some of your peers are doing, obviously getting that feedback on your own essay is great, but seeing what they're doing can be really useful to you as well.
That's super helpful. And also, students probably should be aware that that's not an uncommon technique that's used once you get to college. So it's a great practice even for once you arrive on a campus a year from now. Holly Haran asks, and I'm going to throw this question to you, Dalton, sort of a mechanical question. Are you able to see what the essay prompts are for each type of application before choosing the one you want to use?
Yes, so you are absolutely able to check all those out on all the different websites, our own, as well as those different application types that we have used. All of these applications are opening up in August. Our first application deadline isn't until November 1st. So you've got lots of time to read those different prompts, ruminate over them, find one that really kind of speaks to you. But you can absolutely hop on there and start to figure out kind of like what those are going to be.
That's great. Great advice. Okay. Angelica asked on Instagram, because we actually posed some questions ahead of time, or tried to solicit some questions ahead of time on Instagram, asked, I'm a transfer student. How detrimental is the essay for transfer admission, or is it more focused on your grades? And I can respond to that, Angelica. It's a great question. The essay is certainly important in how we get to know students on both the entering first year and transfer application. I would say that there's probably less of an emphasis as part of the transfer process, which tends to be more straightforward and more focused on academic performance in college, because we're trying to assess your ability as demonstrated by what you have done over the this first period in your college journey. But it's not unimportant. We still do want to get to know you and how you fit into the community. So definitely be prepared to respond in a helpful manner on that one. The next question I want to ask is from Afan Habib, and I'm gonna throw this one to you, Dr. Sierra, again, because you're so experienced in essay writing and reviewing and perhaps helping students. How would you recommend approaching a personal topic to discuss in your essay if you're unsure about the topic? So when you're working with students and they're just sort of stuck, they've got that writer's block, how do you start?
Yeah, you're right. I've taught freshman composition for years. I don't want to say how long. It's been a hot minute that I've taught freshman composition. So I've been in this situation several times where students, they come to my office and they sit down and they say, I just don't know what to write about for the essay. I don't know what to do. And first of all, pro tip in general, I always would prefer that a student came to me to talk about that rather than sit at home and be frustrated that they can't figure out what to write about, because my job is to help you figure out what to write about. So don't just sit at home, like come to me. But I always start with a conversation. What do you like? What are you interested in? And sometimes I get students telling me, well, the things that I like don't relate to the topic. Well, don't worry about that for right now. Just back up into what are you passionate about? What do you like? What are you interested in? What could you talk to me about for hours and never get tired of talking about? And then once you've got an idea of some mix of things that fall into that category, then start to backtrack into what is the essay prompt and how can I make the things that I'm passionate about, that I love and care about, fit into this essay topic, right? Because if you start just staring at that essay prompt, you're going to go in circles, you're going to get frustrated, and you're not going to make a lot of productive progress. But if you start with what you love, and then you backtrack into, okay, how does what I love fit into the essay topic? I think that you're going to find a better path to figure out what you like. And I also want to point out that I said at the start, this is a conversation. So if you're struggling with an essay topic, talk it out with somebody, right? Again, mom, dad, sister, friend, college counselor, like whoever's a good sounding board for you and whatever your situation is. Don't start by staring at a blank Word document, because I think everybody's been there and it's not a happy place.
I think that's outstanding advice. Casey Barber Villarreal asks, is the second essay prompt you read about inclusivity, diversity on the TCU admissions page? Not yet. Casey, we actually are finalizing this right now. You all got a sneak preview because, as I mentioned, it's a brand new question. So you aren't going to be able to see it yet, but we will have it up very soon, and certainly in time for you to work through the application in a timely manner, which actually gets to another question that Ainsley Robinson asks, and that is, does it matter when you apply? Does applying as early as possible benefit you? Dalton, can you respond to that one about how our process works?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sorry, you cut out for that last little, like right before you let in.
Oh, sorry. The question was, does it matter when you apply, when you submit your application?
Mm-hmm. No. We do encourage you to apply for that early action or early decision November 1st deadline if you have that opportunity. And honestly, we think that is better for you as students. By applying by that earlier deadline, you are going to be hearing back from TCU earlier. You start to learn a little bit more about what your financial aid offer is going to be and some things like that, which is great. Within the confines of those individual deadlines, though, it truly does not matter. As admission counselors, we aren't reading through those applications until after that November 1st deadline. So it's all going to be the same to us, whether you apply right on August 1st or right on November 1st. So what I tell students is do what's best with your own timeline. You know, some of our students are playing football in the fall or they're in band, and so they're just really busy during that semester, and it's a hectic time. For others, maybe you are going to a bunch of different camps and mission trips and other, kind of organized activities during the summer, and that's really kind of just like your very busy time of year. So do what's going to be least stressful for you, and just know that we aren't really looking into those until that November 1st deadline.
Yeah, I think sometimes students can find it helpful to sort of knock out their essay and the bulk of the application during the summer, just so that they're not having to do that while they're in school. From an admission standpoint, it makes no difference at TCU. From a sort of student stress level standpoint, sometimes it's helpful to knock it out early, just because you don't realize it yet, but your senior year of high school is so busy that having the college admission process sort of looming over you can feel like a class on top of all of your other classes. So, to the extent that you can finish that on the early side, it's great for you. But again, as Dalton said, doesn't really make a difference to us. Lisa King Tyler asks a great question. And what she asks is, are you all sick of hearing COVID stories, or is it still relevant if you have a compelling angle? Actually, I kind of want to hear both of y'all's perspective on this question in particular, but then also maybe more generally about topics that may be common among applicants. So maybe Dr. Sierra, can we start with you?
Yeah, short answer, no, we're not sick of hearing COVID stories, right? This has been a, a major global event, and this is going to shape our academic conversations for several years. Um, and we definitely understand that this has impacted your high school experience in ways that you weren't expecting. And it's impacted all of you in different ways, depending on your situation and where in the country you are and how your school district responded to it. So it's something that's both a universal experience now that all of us have had, but also something that's highly personal and individual. So I think you mentioned in your question if you have a compelling angle. And like, yeah, if I were reading an essay that we're talking about a COVID experience, that would be what I would want to know. Like, I know there was a global pandemic. I was there, right? So what I would want to know from it is how did it impact you, and how did you handle it? Like what specific made this a unique experience for you? And as a professor, uh, I've just been trying as much as possible to show the most compassion for my students during this time, because this isn't the college experience that they envisioned all their life when they were in K to 12, right? And I think a lot of us are in that place, right, where we recognize that this has, not been an ideal time for most of us. So we're definitely not tired of hearing it, and just making it something that has a personal angle, I think, is the most important part.
Love that. Dalton, do you want to share any insights that you might have?
Sure. Yeah. Well, one, I would just echo everything that Dr. Sierra said. Very true. There are a few certain topics that we do hear a lot. COVID is definitely going to be one over the next few years. There are a couple others that we do see a little more frequently than some. But I think as long as they're answering those questions that we were talking about earlier, that's the important part. So Dr. Sierra, you mentioned, yes, we all know that this has happened. So that's kind of that first question I was asking earlier. Is this essay about me? So make sure that you're really talking about what your own specific experiences with it were. And that does tie into that second question, which is how did you grow and change through that process? We know that this has been a really tough year and a half or so for everybody, and that we have all changed a ton from it. And so we want to know kind of how that forced you to grow and who you are on the other side of that experience. And I think if you're able to do both of those and you feel like your essay encapsulates both of those questions, then that's great for us. And we're not going to get tired of reading about these things that have been hugely, important experiences in your life, even if it was something that other students have gone through as well, because it's your journey, and it's you who we want to know more about coming to TCU.
This past admissions cycle for honors, I mentioned we had the who would you invite as a guest speaker topic. I want to say I read maybe 20 essays that wanted to invite Elon Musk. But what I wanted to know is, okay, Elon Musk, but why do you want to invite him? And what do you think that he's going to bring? And some of those Elon Musk essays did read as very generic. And some of them had a really interesting, insightful perspective, right? So it's not about going back to what I said about values. It's not necessarily about the topic that you're writing on, but it's about how you show the values you want to come through. And you can do that in a very common topic if it's something that you're passionate about. And I think that you can also strike out if it's a common topic and you write it in a very sort of nondescript way that doesn't let me know who you are and how you fit.
Yeah, I would add to that, and first of all, underscore everything that you both have said. You can strike out on a common topic. You can also strike out on an uncommon topic. So don't be shy about writing on something that you know well just because you think maybe there's some other people writing about it, right? Like to Dalton's point, yeah, we read a lot of essays on scoring the winning goal or being a camp counselor or taking that mission trip. And that's okay, because the reality is that most 17-year-olds haven't scaled Kilimanjaro or cured some insidious disease, or right. I mean, there is just a limited range of experiences that most high school students have had. So don't focus on the what as much as the how you're going to get that message across to us. And I think that's probably the way to go. And then the other point about COVID in particular, and we anticipate seeing a number of essays on that. And in fact, many of the applications now are asking students specifically, if you've been impacted adversely by COVID, please feel free to share that here as an additional response besides the essay. One of the core values we have in our office is empathy, and understand that just as you've lived through this pandemic, so too have we. And I think for many readers, and we're all human, you're going to elicit an emotional reaction because there's a connection there. We've all had that same thing. We've all been impacted, whether it's a family member or friend or just sort of the whole scale of everything. We get it. So don't be shy about responding if that's what's going to be really important to you. Okay, Grace Gannon asks, can we submit a personal essay along with the provided essay prompt? So Dalton, do you want to handle this sort of another mechanical one? There's the essay, but then is there opportunity to share some additional information?
Mm-hmm. There is through that, and then also through our freedom of expression, which someone else had kind of touched on this in one of their questions earlier. Long story short, we can add anything to your application that you would like. So the freedom of expression is an optional piece where students can submit, again, whatever they want. So it can be a video, it can be a piece of art, it can be an additional essay, it can be a poem or a website they've designed. Last year, I had a student who is like an amateur DJ, and he sent me his SoundCloud link to a set that he had done. So yeah, if you're looking at your essay and you're thinking like, this just doesn't fully capture who I am as a person, feel free to do that. Whatever that might look like, the sky is truly the limit for that. The same thing can also be true if there's more information that you want us to know about you. So there are multiple places in the application where you can talk about some of those things. So Heath had just mentioned that we're going to be asking if you've been negatively affected by COVID or by any other sort of like natural disaster or something like that has happened. So you have that opportunity. I would also encourage you to have some conversations with your admission counselor. We'll be able to kind of help give you some additional context and understand some of those things. But something else that we can do is we can take any like email that you send in to us, and we can just pin that to your application as well. So there have definitely been times where a student has told me something else about their things that they are involved in, or their personal life, or other things that are important to that application. And when I'm reading through it, I can click on that email that they have sent me, and I can say, oh, I remember so-and-so, wanted to add this to their resume, or this was a really important piece that they wanted to make sure that we knew about them. So at the end of the day, we won't want you to feel tethered to the application. There are a lot of different ways to get that extra information to us. But the biggest thing is that, again, we want to know you as well as we can within that short space that we get to read through everything. And whatever you can do to inform us of that is going to be beneficial.
You might have heard me say this before if you have been to one of our other Facebook Live sessions. I think I mentioned this early on in a couple months back. And that is, we're trying to get to know you in as many of your 360 degrees as you are willing to share with us. It helps us put this whole puzzle together in bringing in a class of first year and transfer students every semester. And so don't hesitate to include information about yourself, information that you think is going to be relevant. Every once in a while, I'll hear from a student who is not admitted, and they'll say something like, "Oh my gosh, I really wanted to come to TCU. I wish I could, I wish we could have made this happen. I wish I would have been admitted. My sophomore year, my grades really dropped because my my favorite aunt with whom I was extremely close was suffering from cancer and ultimately passed away. And it was over this protracted period. But I bounced back after that. And we say, boy, that's really great information. We wish we would have known at the time when we made our decision, because that can help explain as opposed to just us seeing a drop in grades. So if you've got those sort of speed bumps along the way, share information that can help smooth that over. That can be really important to you. Okay. Let's see. Rachel Harris asks, do the essay prompts for TCU's application change much from year to year? Dalton, you want to take that one?
Yeah, not really, to be totally honest. So yeah, we're trying to hit kind of the same big picture themes in every single prompt that we have. So we might change a little bit here or there, but at the end of the day, we want to give you a space to either share like a personal story that's very important to you, or to talk about a really big picture issue. And so we're trying to kind of give you those same avenues regardless of that exact wording.
Outstanding. These are great questions that everyone is asking. Please keep them coming. Okay. Sarah Grob asks, are essays submitted in the process confidential? Yes, they are. We don't share the essays with people who call on the phone and say, hey, can you tell us what Sarah wrote in her essay? That is yours. Occasionally, if there is something in the essay that might give us a little bit of pause, let's say that you have discussed a history of self-harm, then that's something we might pass along to campus life, just so there is an awareness, so that we can just keep an extra eye out on you. It's not going to necessarily impact the admission decision, but it's confidential in that it's staying within the TCU family. And only relevant people in our community. It's not something that would be shared publicly or with other students or parents, etc. Okay, let's see. Dalton, Haley Whitworth is asking, does applying early decision increase your chances of being accepted?
Yes. So just a very quick overview for folks who might not have heard of the difference between early action and early decision. Early decision is a special type of application that you can submit. And a part of that application is essentially a contract that you, a parent, and a school counselor all sign that basically says if you're admitted to TCU, you're committing to coming to TCU. This is a great option if this is like your number one school, without a shadow of a doubt that this is where you want to be. You were born and the doctor was wearing purple scrubs. You went to the zoo when you were 5 years old, saw a horned frog, and it's the coolest animal ever. If that is you, then considering going early decision could be a great option. Because we so value that sense of community and the school spirit and just the enthusiasm that our students have for being at TCU. If you're making that commitment to us and telling us this is where you want to be, we are going to give you a couple of bonus points on your application as a part of that process. The deadline for that is November 1st, just like early action. Early action is the one that is non-binding. There's no commitment that you're making there. If this is a route that you're considering going, I think that your admission counselor can be a great resource for you. Talk to them about it. We'll be happy to kind of go over those options with you, and every family's circumstances and situations are a little bit different. So we can kind of give you a little more personalized advice and kind of help counsel you to making that decision for yourself.
That's really helpful for everyone to understand. The other piece to that I want to just mention is that along with that commitment saying that you're excited and want to come to TCU, you're also making a financial commitment. And so for that reason, and we know that resources aren't infinite, and in fact, for most families, they can't make that financial commitment up front without knowing what the scholarship and financial aid package is. We have made it a point to cap the number of students that we will admit early decision, so that we don't fill half our class, for example, through that process. That would only sort of further disadvantage the already disadvantaged. And that's something that we did once we started the early decision plan at TCU some 8 years ago. And a lot of highly selective universities will take 40, 50, 60% of their class early. We just think that's categorically unfair. So we've made the philosophical choice not to do that. Okay, Shishir Gundavaram asks, what is the average amount of time that an admissions officer spends looking at an application and related materials? I love this question. Thank you for asking it. I'm going to ask it of both of you. So Dalton, when you're reviewing an application for admission, and you've got a lot that you're going through, how do you do it? How long will it take you? And then Dr. Sierra, as you're reviewing the honors college essays, how long typically would you spend on that? So Dalton, why don't we start with you?
Yeah. So the very short answer, honestly, is it depends. It's going to depend on a lot of different factors that are in your application. So how long and how dense that essay might be. Sometimes, it might be a school that we're not quite as familiar with. So we're spending a little bit more time kind of digging into what your curriculum means and things like that. I will say that just a general ballpark estimate would probably be 15 to 20 minutes on that kind of first initial read through. Now, multiple people are going to be looking at every single application that comes through here. So I think that's important to be aware of as well, is that's kind of our first run through at everything that we're taking a look at. Beyond that, it really can kind of depend on what on several of those different factors. But we do look at every single part of your application. I mean, we are reading both of those recommendation letters. We are reading your essay in its entirety. We are really going through the resume. So every single piece of it will be looked at, and it will be looked at by multiple people.
Excellent.
Yeah, the honors college is kind of interesting because our process is a little different. We want to weight the essay pretty heavily because we understand that there's a variety of different school curriculums and backgrounds. And so someone who was not an honors student in high school may be a fantastic fit for the honors college, and somebody who was an honors student in high school might not be the best fit for our honors college. So we actually have blind essay readers, which means that when I review honors essays, I don't know the student's name, I don't know their transcript, I don't see their letters of recommendation. So I am only looking at that essay, and I'm providing a score and written feedback based exclusively on that essay. And then this way we try to be a little blind to some of the differences that might exist between school districts, right? And so on the 2 essays per student that I read, I'll probably spend about 15 to 20 minutes total on that one student. But again, I'm only looking at those essays, those 2 essays that they submit. And then from there, those essays plus my review of them will go to a committee of people who do have access to everything else and who are looking at that big picture. But adding that sort of layer of separation in there is something that we think helps us be a little more inclusive as a college.
I think that's incredibly helpful, and right, trying to mitigate any bias that might exist in the process, because again, we're all human, and that sort of unconscious bias will creep its way in, even when we wish it wouldn't. Only a couple minutes left, and I wish we had time to get to every question. Y'all are doing a great job at asking them, and you both are doing a great job at answering them. So I found this one really interesting. This is from Gretchen, who is a high school English teacher and would like to help her students prepare to effectively write an application essay. So do either of you or both of you have some advice on how to help prepare students from the teacher's perspective? And you, I don't think we mentioned this yet, but Dalton actually, before he joined our staff, did teach in schools as well. So you have that added layer as well. So do either of you want to respond to that?
Sure. Yeah. Well, first off, Gretchen, as a former English teacher myself, thank you so much for all the hard work that you do, and just for being here after hours and everything too. I think that's awesome. So getting information is definitely a really big part of it. So connecting students with what you hear today is going to be really helpful, whether that is just through kind of sharing that with them or sharing out links and stuff like that. The other biggest thing is just the peer review process. If you can carve out time in class, or if you are one of those people who has students come in during lunch or for tutoring or anything like that, those can be great spaces where students can share those essays with each other. And then also just opening yourself up to kind of providing some of that feedback and stuff like that. Beyond that, yeah, I think that just a lot of the things that we've talked about today on the more technical side, but then also helping them to really understand that their essay needs to focus on them and their own growth. I know I keep coming back to that, but kind of like what he said, we'll say it again so that people will believe us. I think that those are the really big pieces of it. And then also just helping them get away from maybe like more traditional types of writing and things if it is more personal to them. So helping them feel comfortable with using I and talking about themselves in a way that you really don't do in a more academic setting all that much.
Yeah, I think thinking back to when I was doing this as a high school student, which was like only 5 years ago, right? One of the things that I remember thinking to myself is like, I haven't been on a mission trip that changed my life, and I wasn't an athlete, so I never either scored the game-winning goal or lost the game or tried out for the team and didn't make it, right? So I personally felt like all of the sort of the big common topics you would think of as an admissions essay, like I just didn't have those experiences, and I didn't know how to translate what I felt as my like mostly mundane stuff into an amazing essay that would blow someone away. And so if I had a chance to go back to high school Wendi, what I just wish I could have told myself is like, your experiences are enough. There's something interesting about you, right? Maybe you see it and maybe you don't. But I truly believe there's something interesting and cool about everyone out there. And so the challenge is really for you as a student, as a potential applicant, to do some self-reflection and think about what that is. And that can be hard if you don't immediately have like the one thing that I feel like I have to go to. Or maybe you have that one thing, but you feel like that's not core to who you are, right? Like maybe you did score the game-winning goal, but that story doesn't really resonate with you anymore, and there's a reason you don't want to tell that story. Then don't tell that story, right? Find the story that's you and tell that story, because that's the story that I want to hear.
Wonderful. We have already taken up more time than we promised that we would, and so we have to end there. I'm so sorry to do that. But this has been a great hour together. It flew by, at least it did for me. So I just want to express my gratitude to everyone who's joined us, to Dalton, to Dr. Sierra. Also want to plug the John V. Roach Honors College, and you can learn more at honors.tcu.edu. And you can learn more about admissions in general to TCU at admissions.tcu.edu. You can also always email us at frogmail, frogmail @tcu.edu. We are happy to converse with you that way. You can call our office at 817-257-7490. You can show up. We are open. And again, my thanks to everyone for being here. We are taking a break next month. We will not be doing Facebook Live in August. It's our summer break, but we will be back in September with an episode that is even better than ever. So thank you all so much. Have a wonderful evening. Go Frogs.